Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's been 3 weeks since we woke up on Shabbat morning to news of the unconscionable atrocities and brutalities that Hamas terrorists perpetrated upon our people on Shabbat Simchat Torah. 3 weeks of anger and sadness and tears and loneliness as so many of us lay awake night after night waiting for news and not knowing what to do or where to turn. Over these past 3 weeks, I found myself struggling with what to do, what to say, and how to react and respond in ways that honor where I find myself emotionally and spiritually in this moment. And I imagine that might be true for you too. I'm someone who's spoken out strongly against the increasing religious extremism in the Israeli government that I believe undermines what Israel can and should be. And I've been unequivocal in my support of a two-state solution to allow what I believe both Jews and Palestinians, and really all human beings, want, which is to live a life free from terror and to raise their children and families without fearing for their lives. And that's a reality that I still pray for, and despite this moment, believe that we can still achieve. And yet we cannot do it while there is a terrorist regime at the helm whose stated mission is that Israel and the Jewish people must be wiped from the earth. And I'm afraid. I'm afraid for the future of Israel, and I'm afraid for what that means for the Jewish people. I'm afraid the death toll will continue to rise on both sides, that hundreds more Israeli and Palestinian lives will be lost. And I'm afraid for what that means for us here in America as anti-Semitism and Islamophobia continue to rise. And I'm afraid for the 224 hostages that remain Hamas's captives. I'm afraid for them, and I'm afraid for their families, who will continue to live this nightmare of uncertainty, not knowing what will become of their loved ones, and uncertain that they'll ever see them again. And I'm afraid that the longer that this goes on, the more that our attention will turn elsewhere, and that we'll forget about these innocent captives, that we'll forget about the babies taken from their mother's arms, and the sweet toddlers who remind me too much of my own children, the disabled veterans and the Holocaust survivors, the teenagers and the young adults at music festivals, the entire families driven from their homes and now find themselves at the mercy of terrorists. So tonight on this Shabbat, I want to take a few moments to teach about the mitzvah of Pidyon Shavuyim, the mitzvah of redeeming the captives. This week's Torah portion, Lech Lecha, continues with some of the most well-known and widely taught pieces of Torah. God tells Abraham, Lech Lecha, go forth to the land that I'll show you. Go forth into the unknown with your courage and your faith to guide you. And Abraham does. We know this Abraham, the one who sets forth on this journey. We know Abraham, the first monotheist. We know Abraham who receives a promise and a blessing from God. We know the Abraham whose faith is tested as he's commanded to sacrifice his son Isaac. And we know the Abraham who argues with God and fights for the lives of the innocent in Sodom and Gomorrah. But we aren't as familiar with Abraham the warrior, Abraham the hero. But that too is in this week's Torah portion. Here we read as Abraham learns that his nephew Lot has been taken prisoner by soldiers who attacked Sodom. As soon as Abraham hears this, he doesn't hesitate. He musters all of his household, some 318 people, the Torah tells us, and goes in pursuit of his nephew. And that night, Abraham and his troops defeated Lot's captors in battle and rescued Lot along with the women and other people being held captive. The Talmud teaches that the mitzvah of Pidyon Shavuyim, redeeming the captives, is known as a mitzvah rabbah, a great commandment. And it's a mitzvah that is so great and so important that God actually self-describes as a redeemer of captives in the first line of the Ten Commandments. I am Adonai your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Rabbeinu Bachia, a medieval commentator, teaches that God actually didn't describe God's self as the one who created heaven and earth because God wanted to mention the commandment to redeem the captives, 600,000 of them in this case, which is greater than the mighty wonder of creation. Rambam, Maimonides, teaches that ransoming captives has precedence over feeding and clothing the poor. Indeed, there's no greater commandment than ransoming captives, For not only is the captive included in the category of the hungry, the thirsty, and the naked, but his or her very life is in danger. And another of our sacred texts speaks about the need to do this mitzvah not only as done in all possible haste, but to do it as soon as possible, because every moment puts off retaining the captives where it is possible to do sooner. It is like shedding blood. This week marks 3 weeks since 224 captives, 224 of our brothers and sisters and members of Klal Yisrael, members of the Jewish people, were taken hostage. 3 weeks of uncertainty and terror and fear. 3 weeks of a living nightmare, uncertain of when or if they'll wake up and return home. And we are all members of the Jewish community, all one interconnected family. These are our parents, our children, our loved ones. We are all called upon to redeem them and to bring them home. So I beg of you, don't look away. Look at the faces on the posters, listen to their stories. Don't look away from 3rd grade Ella and 10th grade Daphna Eliakim, sisters who love TikTok and love to laugh. Don't look away from 84-year-old Dietza Hyman, abducted from her home. Don't look away from Amit, who celebrated his 16th birthday in captivity instead of home with his family. Don't look away from these beautiful faces who have family and friends and dear ones worried for them. Their fate is uncertain, and they are at the mercy of terrorists. I'm not naive, and I know that it's far from simple. Each and every one of these hostages has a story and a family and people who care about them. Each and every life is precious and is to their loved ones an entire world, and each and every one of them is in mortal danger. I don't know how the Israeli government will make these impossible decisions. I don't know how or even if they have the ability to redeem the captives. We are in dark and unprecedented times without easy answers or clear paths forward. But just as our ancestor Abraham practiced the mitzvah of Pidyon Shavuyim, freeing the captive, we are called upon to do the same. We can't go in there and redeem them from the hands of terrorists ourselves, but we can make the promise to them, to their families, and to each other that we won't turn away and that we will not forget them. So I invite you to please join me in praying for the welfare and the safe return. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, like Leah and Rachel and Jacob, bless the captured and the many kidnapped citizens, men, women, and young children held in painful captivity in Gaza, among them along with all who are in captivity and distress. May it be your will, Adonai Tzevaot, God of hosts, to rescue and redeem these souls and return them swiftly to their families in the land of Israel. As it is written, thus said God, a cry is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children who are gone. And thus says God, restrain your voice from weeping, your eyes from shedding tears, for there is reward for your labor, declares God. They shall return from the enemy's land. And we together say,
Amen.